its entirety, in fact, anytime at our website. Just go to cspan.org. Now, live to Springfield, Massachusetts for the first 2002 governor's debate between Democrat Shannon O'Brien, who recently won the state's Democratic primary, and the Republican candidate Mitt Romney. Here's our live coverage from Western New England College.
For the first debate between the Democratic and Republican Party candidates for governor of Massachusetts, in alphabetical order, Shannon O'Brien and Mitt Romney. I'm Jim Madigan from WGBY Public Television. I will be the moderator for this evening's debate, which has been jointly organized by our partners, the Institute for Legislative and Governmental Affairs at Western New England College School of Law and Western New England College, WGBY Public Television, WFCR Public Radio, and the Springfield Union News and Sunday Republican, the Springfield newspapers. This one-hour debate will have 4 segments. The candidates will make opening statements. Then they will answer questions from panelists. Then students from Western New England College will read questions submitted by the public. Finally, closing statements of up to 2 minutes each. The speaking order for each segment was determined by a separate coin toss. Time now for our opening statements, 2 minutes each, starting with Mitt Romney.
Thank you very much, Jim, and thank you to all of those at Western New England College for making this opportunity available to us. I want Massachusetts to fall back on its history and remember that it has long been a place of opportunity, where people came from all over the world because of our education, because of great jobs, even to retire. Today, there are a lot of people in Massachusetts who wonder, will my job be there for me? Will the schools do the job they need to for my kids? Can I retire in Massachusetts and pay for my prescription drugs and also pay for my housing? Massachusetts needs to be a place of opportunity again, and that's why I'm running. I want to make sure that our schools are so great that every parent knows their child will get a great opportunity graduating from a Massachusetts school. I want to make sure that the jobs are so plentiful here that instead of companies leaving Massachusetts, they arrive here, bringing more employment. I want to assure that housing becomes more plentiful and therefore more affordable so citizens can buy a home. And so people getting started in life will be able to find a place they can live reasonably. And I want our seniors to be confident that they can afford prescription drugs here. And they also know that if the time in life comes when they need aid, that they not only can have a great nursing home they might look at, but also terrific home care. Massachusetts can be a place of great opportunity again. We have some big problems in our way. I call it the mess on Beacon Hill, which has created some of these problems. It's not a Republican mess. It's not a Democrat mess. It's a mess on Beacon Hill caused by too many people having been there way too long. I believe it's time to get out from underneath the labyrinth of lobbyists and to have people who are committed to doing the right thing for the people of Massachusetts. I'm convinced that having had the experience I've had in the real world, that I can come to help the people in Massachusetts have great jobs, great schools, and that we can do the best for Massachusetts. I'm convinced that having a great team, a clear vision, and hard work, we can make those dreams reality.
It's time, sir, and now a 2-minute opening statement from Shannon O'Brien.
Thank you. And I also want to begin by thanking Western New England College and the media sponsors for hosting this debate. It's always great to be back home in Western Massachusetts, where I learned to ski at Mount Tom, where I enjoyed the roller coaster at Riverside Park, and where I played softball at Daly Field in East Hampton. A lot is at stake in this year's election. 400,000 people across the state don't have health insurance. Seniors are struggling to pay for the cost of prescription drugs. Tens of thousands of workers have lost their jobs, and many families are finding it difficult to purchase a new home. And our state's budget is threatening the funding that is critically important to our local schools. For 12 years, our state has suffered from gridlock on Beacon Hill and mismanagement in state government, from the out-of-control big dig cost overruns to a budget process that has to be reformed. The result has been one missed opportunity after another to help people. I'm running for governor because I don't want to let one more opportunity pass us by. I offer a proven record of cleaning up the treasurer's office and the experience that our next governor needs to get results for families, for seniors, and for kids. As candidates for governor, I believe that Mr. Romney and I owe you, the voters, a positive debate on the issues that are important to you. That's the type of campaign that I ran in the primary, and that's why I think I won that race. I believe that we need to do our best to focus on the issues and that we need to maintain a positive message in this race. I'm hoping that Mr. Romney will join me in this effort to raise the level of debate. Tonight I'm proposing that Mr. Romney and I agree that if either one of us runs an ad that mentions the other candidate, that we will agree to stand by that ad by appearing in it and stating that my campaign paid for that ad. And I suggest that the Democratic and Republican parties ought to do the same as well, so that we can give you, the voters of Massachusetts, the caliber of debate that you deserve. I thank you all for having us here tonight, and I look forward to talking more about my record and my vision for making Massachusetts a better place to work and to live.
Time is O'Brien. Thank you. Now to our panelist questions. Candidates have 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer a question directed to them. Then their opponent has 1 minute for a comment or rebuttal. The first question is from Dan Ring, State House Bureau Chief for the Springfield Union News and Sunday Republican. The question goes to Mr. Romney.
Yes, Mr. Romney, if you are elected governor on November 5th, you will need to produce a plan in January to eliminate about a $1.5 billion deficit that already exists in next year's budget. There have already been hundreds of layoffs, serious cuts in education and health care. You say you don't want to raise taxes. Please be specific and tell voters how you will balance next year's budget.
I certainly will. Thank you, Dan. We're going to begin with taking out the way that we've been doing budgets in the past, which is that we have a process where people have concluded that the first place you look is raising taxes and the next place you look is cutting benefits. What happened this year was just inexcusable. To cut 50,000 people from our health care rolls is just hard to understand, and to raise taxes over $1 billion as well. So as I look at our budget, I'm going to begin by saying, how can we reduce waste? How can we reduce inefficiency? We bring in dollars in the state treasury, and that money goes through a whole series of bureaucrats, and when it finally comes out, it's been chipped away at by one party after another. I want to make sure that we've taken out the waste, the bureaucracy. I want to make sure in the area of health care that the mound of paperwork that overwhelms our health care system is streamlined so we can save hundreds of millions of dollars. I want to take an agency like our highway department and combine it with the Mass Turnpike Authority so we don't pay for that duplication. I'm going to find every source of patronage there is in the Commonwealth and root it out piece by piece. I believe we can save hundreds of millions of dollars and perhaps as much as $1 billion in waste, inefficiency, and mismanagement on Beacon Hill. I'm also convinced we can get some help from the federal government. About 10 years ago, for every dollar we sent to Washington, we got $1.06 back. That's now dropped to 84 cents. We can do better, and I will do better. And I'm convinced that I can do better for the people of Massachusetts.
Ms. O'Brien, 1 minute.
I've already demonstrated that I know how to fix problems on Beacon Hill. I've returned a record amount of local aid to cities and towns by managing the state lottery more efficiently. I've saved over $500 million by managing our finances smarter. I've proven that I already know how to manage state government better, to shave as much waste out of state government as possible, and I have plans to do even more. I have a concrete plan to save between $100 and $150 million on our Medicaid payments. I have a plan to do bulk purchasing of electricity, a plan to do a top-to-bottom management review, just like we did at the lottery, to save money across state government. Mitt Romney's plan is out of touch. It doesn't recognize what reality is. He thinks we can increase spending, cut taxes, and also close the billion-dollar budget deficit. His plans don't have real numbers. It won't work, and that's why I should be elected governor, because I have a real plan for change, a real plan for reform, and a real way to manage things better on Beacon Hill.
And now a question for Ms. O'Brien from Karen Brown of WFCR Public Radio.
Ms. O'Brien, the pharmaceutical industry spends $1.5 million a year on Beacon Hill lobbyists. That's more than any other industry. Meanwhile, as you mentioned earlier, the price of prescription drugs has risen dramatically, and Massachusetts seniors are driving to Canada to buy U.S. drugs at a lower cost. Given that your campaign has taken money from the healthcare industry, can you assure voters that you are in a position to challenge the status quo and make prescription drugs affordable for everyone?
Absolutely, and I believe that I am the one candidate that's in this race that actually has a concrete plan that will work. When Mitt Romney says that the federal government is going to bail us out and provide us with more funds, it just means that he doesn't have the understanding of how these reimbursements rates work. I have a plan to use Chapter 340B, a federal law that will allow us to provide more prescription drugs for senior citizens. It calls for working with community health centers where we can cut the cost of prescription drugs by nearly 50% off of wholesale costs. I also call for better managing the care of seniors so that they stay healthier for the long run. I also think that we need to do a better job of health care planning. All of these things will go a long way towards providing more prescription drugs for senior citizens in Massachusetts. But I've already demonstrated that I've been independent. I've stood up to the people on Beacon Hill, frankly, the people who are supporting Mitt Romney. I've stood up to the people who brought us the cost overruns at the Big Dig. I've stood up to the legislature when I felt they were wrong and they made the wrong decisions when they wanted to take money out of the pension fund. I've demonstrated time and time again that I'm an independent leader, someone who puts real ideas on the table, and someone who has the experience to get the job done. When it comes to prescription drugs, I have the best plan and I have the experience to get that plan implemented on behalf of the seniors of this state.
Mr. Romney, 1 minute.
Thank you. You know, I think we have to stand back and just be honest with all the voters and let people know that lobbyists have far too much influence on Beacon Hill. I'm concerned about the connections lobbyists have and the decisions that are made based on lobbyists and based on campaign contributors. It's got to end. I do not have those connections. I come in as an outsider. My whole objective is to make sure that Massachusetts government works for the people and not the other way around. In the area of prescription drug costs, that's something I know how to deal with. I've been hired by companies to come in and help them lower their costs of purchasing. I've done it successfully. That's what I do. I'm going to go after prescription drug costs in Massachusetts, not just with bulk purchasing plans, but with direct and specific plans to bring down our costs. Look on our website. You'll see how we're going to do it. We can be more efficient, and we can do it by throwing off the ties to big business and lobbyists.
A question now to Mr. Romney from Professor William Mandel of Western New England College.
Mr. Romney, one of the principal concerns of your candidacy, if I may be a little blunt, is whether you have what it takes to be an effective governor. You have little background in state government, and people wonder whether your time in business or at the Olympic Games is adequate training for the job. Furthermore, your extended absence from Massachusetts must have left you somewhat uninformed on state issues and unfamiliar with our political landscape, perhaps lending you more to the mercy of staffers and lobbyists should you get the job. Please tell us how, despite these deficiencies, you can be an effective leader and reformer, especially with experienced players like Speaker Finneran standing in the way.
Well, fortunately, we have plenty of people on Beacon Hill who have experience on Beacon Hill. We have no shortage of that. What we do need is somebody that has vision and leadership and who is willing to make Massachusetts go to work for the people again. Someone who's willing to throw off the lobbyists and make sure that people come first. I have had the opportunity to manage different organizations, 3 during my career. The most recent was the Olympics. And at the Olympics, I learned how to deal with the federal government because the support there was extraordinary. They provided over $400 million to us, record amounts, for security and for transportation. I also dealt with the state government because my board of 53 people came from both the state, where a Republican appointed half our board, and the city, where a liberal Democrat appointed the other half. I'm able to work with people across party lines, not just Republicans, not just Democrats, to get the job done. Vision, hard work, and commitment, they are the key. I'm committed to making that difference for Massachusetts. As I look around me and look at the people up on Beacon Hill, we have all the folks we need to have up there that know the plumbing and the wiring. What we need is to have somebody who will get the job done. We've seen over these last years with tax hikes, with budgets that are balanced by throwing people off our health care rolls, with the Treasurer's Office adding $1 million to her payroll at a time when we were in fiscal crisis. This kind of Beacon Hill insiderism just has to end, and I'm committed to making sure that we have leadership that will make a real difference for the people.
Ms. O'Brien, 1 minute.
Thank you. I think that when it comes to getting things done, I've already demonstrated that I know how to get things done on Beacon Hill. I've cleaned up a mess in the Treasurer's Office, and frankly, Mr. Romney, you're wrong. We haven't increased our budget by $1 million. We've saved $1 million on our bank fee. So actually, we're getting more done, we're protecting the public's money, and we're doing it for about the same amount of money that when I came in. I've cut costs at the lottery and returned a record amount of local aid, and I know how to work with Democrats and Republicans. You know, when it comes to getting things done, I think that we've heard a little bit more style over substance. When we hear Mitt Romney talk about getting rid of the lobbyists, just this past week he had a registered lobbyist who lobbies for business interests represent him to attack my record on Beacon Hill. I'm the only candidate in this race who's already saved the taxpayers over $500 million, who's returned a record amount of local aid, and who's worked in a bipartisan fashion in the best interest of the people of this state.
A question now from Barry Krieger of 22 News for Shannon O'Brien.
Ms. O'Brien, Mr. Romney invites us to visit his website frequently in his ads, which I did.
Do you like the pictures of me in it?
They could be better. According to a transcript on that website of an interview with you with Judy Woodruff on CNN's Inside Politics, you said, and I'm quoting here, Mitt Romney's already promising jobs to Republican activists who are helping his campaign. Mitt Romney has said there are no names and no job promises and has called on you to name names or apologize. Can you name names? And if not, do you owe Mr. Romney an apology?
Let me take you back to how this all began. Mitt Romney sent Kerry Healy, the self-proclaimed pit bull of the Romney campaign, to attack the record of the people working for me in the Treasurer's office, claiming that I only hired people based on patronage. She specifically mentioned by name my first deputy, Michael Travellini, someone who has a Harvard undergraduate degree, someone who has a Georgetown law degree, someone who ran the city of Boston's retirement fund and pension system before he came to work for me. He's been one of the people who's helped me bring real change in the Treasurer's office. You know what? I made a mistake. I stand by my statement about what happened in this campaign with one of Mr. Romney's supporters. But I'm not going to do the same kind of smear and fear kind of tactics that Mr. Romney has been engaging in. He's been questioning my integrity, and from the beginning of this campaign, he has demonstrated that he can't be trusted. He didn't tell us the truth about what his residency was when he first came into the state and how he paid his taxes. He promised to the voters of Massachusetts that he wasn't going to run against a sitting Republican governor. He broke that promise. He did run against Jane Swift. He promised that he wouldn't choose a running mate. He was going to let the voters decide. He broke that promise as well. When it comes down to who's telling the truth and integrity, I think that he has to go a long way before he starts criticizing me. But I stand by my statement, and I also stand by the top-notch people who've been working with me in the Treasurer's office to bring real change and to save taxpayers' money.
Mr. Romney.
I must admit to having been a little confused by that answer, because I thought the Treasurer said that you made a mistake, but that you stand by your statement. And if you made a mistake and you know someone who I've promised a job to, then I hope you'll tell me who it is, because I have not spoken with one person about a job in my administration. I haven't made an offer. I haven't even discussed it. So you're just wrong. And you either apologize according to your mistake, or say who it is, because it's just not the case. So do you want to do that, or?
I just would like to say, Mr. Romney, I think you owe Michael Travellini an apology, and rather than getting into this back and
I don't know Michael Travellini. He has nothing to do with the question that was raised, which is
he has everything to do. He has everything to do with this issue.
Is he going to work at my administration? Are you suggesting that
if you're smart, he will.
Are you?
If you're smart, you'd pay money to hire him.
Are you suggesting I spoke with him? Are you suggesting that I spoke with him and that I've offered him a job? I don't understand, because the question was asked. You accused me of having made promises to Republicans for positions in my administration, which I haven't done. And you're talking about a Mr. Travellini who works for you. I don't quite get it.
That's fine, sir. I allowed you just a little bit, since you did ask your opponent.
We had a bit of a back and forth there, but let me just say that there were a couple of things. Great, thank you. Let me just say that I am a person of my word and integrity. That's why I was asked by the United States Olympic Committee to go out and fix the games. There were a number of things that were said here that I couldn't exactly follow. I indicated a moment ago that the treasurer had increased her staff by $1 million. She said that was wrong. That she'd lowered bank fees by $1 million, and that made it even. Well, that's true. She lowered bank fees by $1 million, but raised her staff by $1 million. That's the kind of insiderism that occurs on Beacon Hill. We take a savings in one place to add patronage in another, and it's just got to stop.
Thank you, Mr. Romney. Question now from Ray Herschel of News 40 for Mr. Romney.
Mr. Romney, you've stated during this campaign that if elected governor, you intend to serve a full 4-year term. You have your skeptics, though, obviously. The last 2 governors of this state have left before their terms expired. Paul Cellucci to become ambassador to Canada, Bill Weld to try to become ambassador to Mexico. I'd like to propose this scenario for you this evening. If for some reason Vice President Dick Cheney could not run again with President Bush in 2004, and the president personally called you and said, Mitt, I need you, our party needs you to run with me as my vice president, what would you tell the president?
Hello, President Bush. It's an honor to receive your call. No, you must have a wrong number. I would certainly listen to his comments. I appreciate the compliment that people who are running against me have suggested that I would be even considered for such a position. And then I would say in clear, unequivocal words, no, I've made a commitment to the people of Massachusetts. It's a commitment I have made time and again. I will serve all 4 years. Perhaps I'll serve 8 years if I'm reelected. This is not a job that could be done in less than 4 years. We have some tough challenges. I want to make sure that we can, if possible, roll back that tax increase that was put in this year by the legislature. But I don't want to have to cut any services to do so. I want to make sure that we can roll it back because the economy is rolling. And I'm going to go to work to bring more jobs to Western Massachusetts and the rest of the state. I'm also going to have to find ways to cut as much waste and bureaucracy as possible. It's going to take time and a lot of effort, a good 4 years. Our schools, they're great schools, but we can do better. And I need all 4 years to make that happen. Housing, we have the highest cost housing in the nation. To get that down to a level where people can afford housing in Massachusetts is going to take all 4 years. Healthcare, concerns of our senior citizens, they're very much in my mind. I want to assure that I have all the time necessary to be a great governor of Massachusetts. I will be here all 4 years. You can count on it.
That's time, sir. Ms. O'Brien, a minute.
I pledge that if George Bush calls me and asks me to run for vice president, it will be an unequivocal no. But I would like to take the balance of my time to respond to the last question. When Mitt Romney said that we cut in one area of our budget to increase patronage, I want to remind you who those people are. Before I came into the treasurer's office, no one was balancing the state's checkbook. Mitt Romney has surrounded himself with the Joe Malone team, the people who brought you the waste and mismanagement, theft and fraud at the Treasury and at the lottery. So what we've had to do, yes, we've had to add internal auditors. We've added people who are balancing the state's checkbook on a monthly basis right now. We've done a better job protecting the taxpayers' money. We've cleaned up. After the Romney-Malone friends, we've had to do a much better job. So we're doing it for the same amount of money, but the taxpayers' money is better protected now.
And we have a question now from Dan Ring to Shannon O'Brien.
Ms. O'Brien, your critics say you're just another lifetime politician. They say you're the wrong person to change government because you're a major inside player yourself. Mitt Romney says it would be a very sad thing if we elected a major inside player on Beacon Hill as governor. How should voters decide along this issue?
The way they should decide is they need to elect someone who can get things done on Beacon Hill. You know, you're going to hear lots of distortions of my record tonight and for the next several weeks that we're in this campaign. But my record is clear. I've stood up to the status quo. Frankly, the people that Mitt Romney has surrounded himself with, I've stood up to them. I stood up to the people in the Republican administration when they weren't telling the truth about the cost overruns at the Big Dig. Out here in Western Massachusetts, that's an especially sensitive issue because not only was our tax dollar money going into the Big Dig, but money was being held back from projects all across Western Massachusetts. That was another mistruth that was told by the administration. I've stood up to the leadership on Beacon Hill as well in the legislature, the Democrats. I disagreed with the Senate when they wanted to take money away from the pension fund. I understood that sticking with our funding plan for the pension fund would be a protection of the taxpayers' dollars. I've been independent. I've already worked hard to clean up a mess. I've already saved the taxpayers $500 million. I know how to get things done on Beacon Hill. And I also know how to work in a bipartisan fashion. I recognize my friend, he's not looking right now, Brian Lees, Republican minority leader from the Springfield area. He served on my transition team and has helped me to become a better state treasurer. I'll work with Democrats and Republicans to be the best governor that I possibly can.
Mr. Romney.
I also want to say thank you to Brian Lees, who brought me over here this evening as one of my strongest supporters.
And you are lucky to have him.
That's exactly right. You know, I just don't think it's credible for someone who's been on Beacon Hill since college to suggest that they're independent of Beacon Hill. And I really want to have at least one person on Beacon Hill who really is truly independent, who's not tied with all the lobbyists up there. And there are telltale signs of people who are Beacon Hill insiders. They raise taxes. And as a senator and state representative, Shannon O'Brien raised taxes time and again: income tax, excise tax, sales tax, even voted to keep the services tax from being eliminated. That's a telltale sign. There's also the Beacon Hill salute. Insiders use it all the time. It's point to someone else when there's a problem. Point to oneself when anything goes well. We have to have someone in the governor's office who will take responsibility, and that's something I'll do for the people.
And Karen Brown now with a question for Mr. Romney.
Mr. Romney, in your TV ads, you've told voters that you will dismantle the state's bilingual education program and support an English immersion approach, the one embraced by the UN's ballot initiative. But since that initiative passed in California, test scores have fallen for Spanish-speaking children, and the California Department of Education has characterized the approach as a failure. Why do you recommend it for Massachusetts, and can you point to any studies that show non-English speaking children can learn the language in 1 year and then keep up with their peers in regular classes?
Thank you. I am absolutely committed to having the children in our schools be taught in English. I'm convinced that English is the door to opportunity in America. And if our kids aren't fluent in English, then they're not going to have the opportunities they need. This is a matter of putting our children ahead of the lobbyists and the special interests. I'll be happy to provide to you, Karen, studies. I don't have them with me up on the stands. I just have my scrawled notes here that I've written out, but we'll be happy to show you those. I've talked to people in California and across the country about this initiative. I'm convinced particularly that when kids come into school in the kindergarten age, that's the time to get them into English in a big way. I was at a school in Jamaica Plain where the principal said that half the student body is being taught in Spanish. I said, boy, that's amazing. That's a huge student body. How many of those people were born outside the United States? He said 5. The rest have been born in the United States and yet are being taught in Spanish. I want them taught in English so they can be fluent in all of the vocabulary necessary to get great jobs here and to proceed in America as any other citizen. I'm convinced that our schools can do better in a lot of ways. I want to make sure that we have teacher tenure reform in districts that aren't working. I want to have merit pay for our best teachers. I want to take discipline problems that are in our schools causing disruption and have them put on a separate track. But English full-day kindergarten, it's something I care deeply about. I'm putting the kids absolutely first.
Ms. O'Brien, a minute.
I want to put our children first, and that's why I oppose the UN's petition. It is punitive. It would allow teachers to be sued for speaking in a student's native language. And the studies that I think you were referencing, look at the state of California. They passed an initiative. They anticipated they would save lots of money, that 90% of students in California would transition within 1 year into English classes. 9% a year are transitioning because there is not the flexibility and the ability to give children the right type of training that they need. I support the Larkin-Antonioni bill. It was supported by every Republican state senator and signed by Governor Swift. This bill calls for accountability. It literally will allow for schools to be taken over by the state if they don't transition children into English classes. Even the Bush administration does not support the UN's petition. We need to do everything that we can to close that gap, but providing students with flexibility and the best training they can will make them speak English, will make them be better students and perform better.
Professor Bill Mandel with a question for Shannon O'Brien.
Ms. O'Brien, every few months, Western Massachusetts residents look forward to the announcement of yet another projected cost increase for the Big Dig, a project very close to our Western Mass hearts. As these costs continue to rise, where should the money come from? And will we likely see further spending cuts and delays on bridge and highway projects out here in Western Massachusetts, or the reinstatement of tolls on the western end of the Mass Pike?
As you've heard me say on numerous occasions, one of the things I'm most proud of in my tenure as treasurer is having blown the whistle on the cost overruns at the Big Dig. Year after year, the Republican governors promised us that the Big Dig was on time and on budget. Lots of people question the numbers on the Big Dig, but I'm the person who drew the line in the sand and said, enough is enough. If you don't tell us the truth, I won't sign off on the bonds and the money will run out. They didn't tell the truth. We finally got the numbers out, and lo and behold, a $2 billion cost overrun. Well, I worked with the administration, I worked with the legislature to cut the cost of the financing plan, saving a couple $100 million. I know that as governor, we're going to have to work to continue to find ways to pay off this huge public works project. That's why one of the things that I call for in my very first few months as governor is a transportation summit. We need to look at all of our comprehensive transportation needs across the Commonwealth. We need to figure out how we're going to pay for the cost of the Big Dig overruns. Is it tolls? Is it tolls up to New Hampshire? Is it using future surpluses? Is it gas tax? There are many different possible options. But the bottom line is, as governor, I will work to make sure that the numbers add up. I will work, as I always have as treasurer, to make sure that the numbers are honest and to make sure that we have a real plan that provides real solutions so that we can pay for the programs, the transportation needs all across the Commonwealth.
Mr. Romney?
Well, Treasurer O'Brien, when it comes to that famous whistle, I'm afraid I'm going to have to use Paul Harvey's line. And now the rest of the story. The whistle was blown when it was already over a $14 billion project. But Shannon O'Brien went to the legislature when it was a $2.7 billion project. And then when she was on the Transportation Committee of the House and it rose $1.1 billion, there was no whistle. When there was a suggestion made and taken to the floor that Republican governors be required to account for the Big Dig and put those plans out before monies were expended, she said no and voted against that. The budget kept on rising and rising and rising. When she became treasurer, an inspector general report said there's something wrong with these numbers, but she continued to issue new bonds, 7 new bond issues after the first inspector general report. Then came the second inspector general report, now over a $14 billion project, and she takes credit for blowing the whistle. The Boston Globe disagrees as to who blew the whistle, but the point is when the canoe is going over the waterfall, you don't get a lot of credit for blowing the whistle.
That's time, sir. And let's go now to Barry Krieger with a question for Mr. Romney.
Mr. Romney, several Massachusetts communities have approved locating casinos in their municipalities. Palmer and Holyoke are 2 here in Western Massachusetts. In light of the growing budget crisis, the declining revenues, constant flow of Massachusetts residents and gambling dollars to the 2 Connecticut casinos, would you enthusiastically support an initiative in the legislature to legalize casino gambling in Massachusetts, and would you make it a priority?
Well, we've already made the decision in Massachusetts that we're going to have gambling, so that's not a stumbling block for me. The issue is, would a casino make money for us? Would it detract from our lottery revenues and therefore end up not really making money? And so that's something which clearly can be studied by the Treasurer's Office. It's something she's been looking at for the last 4 years, and I don't believe has a firm recommendation as to whether we go ahead or not. I can absolutely confirm to you that I will study it thoroughly if elected governor. And I'll make sure that before my first 4 months are complete, I will have concluded whether it makes us enough money or not to justify having a casino. I don't think we want to have a casino if it's only going to make a few $1 million and cost us public safety funds, transportation funds, and the like. On the other hand, if it can make us $100 or $200 million above what we might lose in the lottery, I'll be all for it. So it comes down to the numbers. If the numbers work, we'll get it done. And I'll make sure that people know what those numbers are before 4 months have passed, not 4 years.
Ms. O'Brien, a minute.
Thank you, and I don't know if you're aware, but there actually have been a couple of different studies that look at casino gambling in Massachusetts and the impact that it may have on the lottery. One study says that it will be impacted, another says that it won't. So I think that it's inconclusive, and I don't think that we will ever know. My position has been that as long as we must protect local aid revenues. I have worked so hard as treasurer to improve the operations at the lottery. When we came into that office, we did the first ever top-to-bottom management review of lottery operations. We found there was theft under the previous Republican administration. We found that there was opportunity for fraud. I've worked hard every single day to maximize revenues coming back to cities and towns. I don't have any philosophical opposition to casino gambling. It's something that we need to explore with a significant budget deficit, but we must never, ever, ever put at risk the local aid which is so critical to cities and towns, which I've worked so hard to increase for communities over the past 4 years.
And our final question from our panelists, from Ray Herschel to Ms. O'Brien.
Ms. O'Brien, you've come out in favor of the MCAS test in Massachusetts. Last week, lawyers for a group of students in Springfield and Holyoke went to federal court right here in Springfield. They want to overturn MCAS as a graduation requirement. They say the test is racially biased, is punitive, and the latest statewide test results indicate that urban communities like Springfield and Holyoke are still lagging far behind their suburban counterparts. My question is, if the federal court were to overturn MCAS and you were governor, do you feel strongly enough about the validity of the test where you would order your Attorney General to appeal this decision to a higher court, or would you go along with a federal court, even if that meant eliminating MCAS as a graduation requirement?
I used to represent the city of Holyoke, and I see some of my friends from Holyoke here in the audience tonight. One of the reasons why I'm so strongly in favor of high standards is because I did represent that city. I understood the gap in learning between poorer children and children from other communities. And frankly, the lawsuit which mandated education reform, the lawsuit which mandated more money going into the public schools was the impetus for us in the legislature to get that done, to put more money in. I support high standards. I believe that the MCAS exam doesn't create the disparity. It just points out what we've been ignoring for so long. And when you understand that 800,000 people living in Massachusetts cannot read above a 5th grade level, and many of those people graduated from our high schools, you know why this is so important. I will work to make sure we have a system that is accountable. If a specific kind of test is overruled by the courts, I will work to make sure that we have a system that does work. I believe that the Republican governors, frankly, the people who are supporting Mitt Romney in this race, these are the people who missed every single deadline to implement education reform. They've almost had a hostile relationship with educators. We need to bring teachers into the process to make sure the test is fair, to make sure that the standards and the curriculum and the test itself is aligned. If that happens, it will be fair, it will withstand judicial scrutiny, and we will have better schools for our children.
Mr. Romney.
Thank you. Making education reform work for our kids has 3 key steps. We've taken 2. One is to have foundation budgets, and I understand that Springfield has the highest spending per pupil in the state. And with all the needs in this area, that may be well appropriate. But number 2 is to have accountability. I fully support the MCAS test and will assure that the MCAS test goes forward, and I'll pursue all legal means to make that happen. But number 3 is the last and the toughest step in education reform. What do we do when schools are letting us down and kids aren't being able to pass? How do we get those schools to turn around? How do we do a better job for our kids in those schools? I've laid out a plan to do that. It's on my website. Look at it. Full-day kindergarten, English immersion, teacher tenure reform in those districts, merit pay for our very best teachers, taking discipline problems out of the class and making sure that they're given their own tough love program, teacher development programs. Everything has to come together to make sure that those school districts don't fail our kids. Thousands and thousands of kids are dropping out or not passing those standards. We got to fix those schools.
That's time, sir. And now, students from Western New England College will read questions that were submitted to the debate organizers from the public. The first question goes first to Ms. O'Brien. Each of you have 1 minute to respond in turn. And the question comes from Anderson Theodore of the Western New England College School of Law. Mr. Theodore.
Thank you, Mr. Madigan. My question, Ms. O'Brien, as a former executive with a healthcare company that ran the failed Charles River West psychiatric facility in Chicopee, how would you protect patients and taxpayers from healthcare companies, including nursing home chains, which fail to operate in a fiscally sound manner?
One of the problems in our healthcare system right now is that since 1991, we've changed all sense of planning. We've completely deregulated the healthcare system. And as a result, we've seen the loss of beds, whether it's general hospital beds or nursing home beds. I understand quite clearly that we have to do a better job of planning within our healthcare system. We also have to do a better job of anticipating the needs, whether it's emergency room diversions, whether it's making sure that we have enough nurses working in these hospitals, whether it's making sure that we have the right reimbursement rates. And frankly, that's why many hospitals and nursing homes in Massachusetts have failed, because the state and federal government have failed to keep the reimbursement rates at such a level where these hospitals can continue to survive. As governor, I have a plan to restore more sanity to this whole planning process, to cut costs out of health care, and to make sure that more people will be covered.
Mr. Romney.
What I found in a circumstance like this is that you don't need more bureaucracy, you need to have more responsibility. And people need to understand who's responsible for making certain things happen. We have a large Department of Health and Human Services, huge budget, a lot of wonderful and expert people who work there. but they don't have clear responsibility as to whose job it is to make sure that our healthcare system is alive and vibrant. We've had way too many hospitals close. We've had way too many nursing homes close. We have doctors that are leaving the state. We have nurses and a shortage in nursing, nurses who are concerned about their jobs as well. We need to go to work to make sure that we protect a critical industry in Massachusetts and at the same time make the quality of health care so excellent that people from around the world continue to come here. The federal government invests over $1.5 billion a year in National Institute of Health grants in Massachusetts institutions because of the quality of our institutions. We need to retain that quality, and I will make sure that the Department of Health and Human Services shrinks down some of those agencies and makes more clear responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now a question for Jennifer Hotchkiss, a question from Jennifer Hotchkiss Kaplan of the Western New England College School of Law, and it goes first to Mr. Romney.
Good evening, Mr. Romney. You have refused to release your income tax forms, even though others, including Governor William Weld, U.S. Senator John Kerry, and your opponent Shannon O'Brien, have released theirs. Do you have something to hide?
I believe very deeply in my personal privacy, what little amount there's left. and in this case, you made a couple of exceptions from your list. Senator Kennedy, when I was running against him, boy, I told him, you've got to release those income tax returns of yours. And he said, no, I value my privacy. And I think he was right, and I was wrong. As a result, I do share his view on this. I'm not going to release my income tax returns. And Shannon O'Brien's husband, with whom I presume they share expenses, likewise hasn't released his income taxes. And I'll be real surprised if Senator John Kerry's wife, Teresa, who I understand is getting close to being a billionaire, is releasing her taxes either. So there is every opportunity to make sure that people know who I am, what I care about. I will tell you that I made more money than I expected, but I'm in this race, not because of money, but because I want to make sure Beacon Hill works for people who don't have money.
Ms. O'Brien, a minute.
Again, I think this is another case where Mitt Romney says one thing and does another. Indeed, when he ran against Senator Kennedy, he attacked him quite vociferously because he did not release his tax returns. Once again in this campaign, he will not release his tax returns. I released my tax returns. My husband, before we were married, we've been filing separately. And Mr. Romney's spokesman actually said that my husband was a bad person for not releasing his taxes, but Mitt Romney was doing it out of principle. Once again, this is an issue of doing one thing and saying another. We need to make sure that we avoid the personal attacks in this campaign. We need to make sure that they're going to be very positive moving forward.
And a question now from Amanda Tecker, a political science student from the School of Arts and Sciences, and it will go first to Ms. O'Brien.
Good evening, Ms. O'Brien. Massachusetts recently passed what was advertised as the most restrictive gun ownership law in the country. If a repeal of the 1998 gun law was to reach your desk as governor, would you sign it or veto it?
The bill that was going through the legislature, I did not support because there were too many loopholes in it, especially as it pertains to domestic violence, people who've been involved with domestic violence. I've always had a common sense gun record. I represented the western part of the state. I supported the rights of sportsmen and people who wanted to go ski shooting to properly and legally use their guns. But I have a plan as governor to make sure that we take guns away from people who would commit crimes. My crime plan calls for 5-year minimum mandatory penalties for people who are felons in possession of guns. My crime plan also calls for giving police greater tools to work within community policing situations. I believe that common sense gun control is the right way to go. That particular piece of legislation was not common sense gun control. The loopholes were too great and would put too many people at risk.
And now, Mr. Romney, a minute.
Well, I likewise did not support that legislation and likewise felt that having individuals that previously have been convicted of felonies have the right to purchase a weapon was not a good idea. I likewise support the right of law-abiding citizens to be able to purchase firearms for hunting purposes and target practice and so forth. We do have tough gun laws in Massachusetts. I support them. I won't chip away at them. I believe they help protect us and provide for our safety. But I want our law-abiding citizens likewise to have the right to purchase and use a weapon for hunting and other purposes. Let me note as well, however, that Shannon O'Brien said, let's not make personal attacks, but the suggestion that my spokesman called your husband a bad person, I hope is off the mark. I never saw that. And if I did, I'll have a little chat with him. But it is not my intent, nor the intent of this campaign, to do anything besides being positive. You've heard that this evening in this campaign. You've seen it in my ads. Time and again, I want people to understand my positions, my vision for the future of Massachusetts. We can be a place of opportunity again.
Time, sir. Thank you. Now, political science student Jeffrey Kidder from the School of Arts and Sciences. A question going first to Mr. Romney.
Good evening, Mr. Romney. The Commuter Bill of Rights on your campaign website states that as governor, you will be implementing anti-rubbernecking measures. What exactly would those measures include?
Well, that's a good question. I'm one of these guys who, over the last 16 years, while some people have been up on Beacon Hill, I've been stuck in traffic along with the rest of Massachusetts, and I'd like to be a voice of the motorists and the commuters. And I've listed a whole series of things I think we can do to make our roads work better and make our transit system work better. And one of the things I mentioned was anti-rubbernecking devices. What is that? It's screening devices. It means when there's construction or when there's an accident, you put up a large screening device so that people coming in the opposite direction or near that project don't get distracted by it, and therefore it doesn't slow us down. I want to make sure that we also de-bottleneck our highways. Way too much money has been sucked into that big dig. We need money coming out in the rest of the state to deal with our needs. I want to assure that we have good signs on our highways. I want to know where I am and how am I going to get to where I want to go. There are a number of things we have to do to make our highways better for all of our citizens. I'm committed to making sure that motorists and people who ride transit have a governor who hears their voice.
Shannon O'Brien, please. 1 minute.
I still don't know what it is, but it sounds like a good idea. I hate those rubberneckers. My plan calls for a transportation summit. You know, we haven't had a comprehensive transportation plan since the early 1970s. That was when we were anticipating the Big Dig, the Red Line extension to Alewife. All of those projects are just about done. I want to call for a summit that will look at, you know, should we be extending the Blue Line up to the North Shore? Should we be bringing trains to Worcester? What are the regional transportation needs in Western Massachusetts that we can fulfill? We need to have a transportation summit, but we also need to know how we're going to pay for it. Mitt Romney's budget plan, you won't be able to buy those screens, Mitt, if we put your budget plan in place, because your plan will create a huge billion-dollar gap that will mean cuts in spending for schools, cuts in spending for transportation needs. We won't be able to accomplish those things. And more rubbernecking, more accidents, it'll be awful.
And our next student question comes from a gentleman who needs a slight introduction. His name is Michael Albano. He is a student in the School of Business. He is not the Michael Albano who's the mayor of Springfield, nor is he a relative of his. Mr. Albano, your question, and it goes first to Shannon O'Brien.
I was going to say, you look marvelous, Mike.
Good evening, Ms. O'Brien. I keep hearing all the candidates talk about affordable housing. How are you going to achieve this?
Mitt Romney's plan calls for the private sector only to create more of a supply of affordable housing. That's how we've gotten into this mess, by making sure that just the private sector deals with these problems, and the cost of housing has skyrocketed. I have a plan to use, in essence, the room under our state's annual credit card that used to be dedicated to the Big Dig and devote that to more housing. An additional $60 million a year. Take it from the Big Dig, put it into housing. I also have a plan to work with local housing authorities, to leverage federal funds, to borrow against those funds, to fix the existing public housing that many of our seniors living on a fixed income need. We also have 2,500 acres of unused space being not used by the state government right now. We need to take those surplus lands and use them more productively for housing. So we have a plan, we have a way to pay for it, and I will get that done when I'm governor.
Mr. Romney.
Thank you. Actually, I do call for public subsidy of housing, and will support the $500 million bond bill that's before the legislature to assure that we can provide housing for those who are unable to pay entirely themselves. But I also believe that we do want to make sure that not just affordable housing and public subsidized housing is part of our answer. You recognize we have the most expensive housing in America, right here in Massachusetts. Why is that? Because we have something in common with the following states: Montana, North Dakota, and Wyoming. Like them, we issue the fewest building permits per person in the country. We need to create a, if you will, explosion in the bureaucracies in our cities and towns and state to get more building permits out. I want to have a statewide building code and a special rehab building code so we can build more housing, affordable, all across the level for middle-class individuals so that people can afford to own a home in Massachusetts. So public housing, affordable housing, as well as housing from the private sector.
Time, sir. Question now from Susan Batista of the School of Business. The question goes first to Mr. Romney.
Good evening, Mr. Romney.
Good evening, Susan.
Massachusetts is one of several states that allows for citizen initiative ballot questions. However, the legislature often subverts the referendum process and goes against citizen wishes. How do you feel as a candidate for governor about citizen-proposed statewide ballot referendums, and in particular about the Clean Elections Law?
Susan, I believe in democracy, and when democracy suggests that people have voted for something, it's my job to assure that that happens. That's one of the reasons I've said that by the end of my first term, I will have been able to implement the voter's choice to roll back the income tax rate to 5%. I will fight for that. I'll give it all of my energy. I'll cut bureaucracy and waste to accomplish it. I expect the economy to come back as well. I'll need that help. I'm not going to cut vital services to our seniors, to our schools, to the poor. That's essential. That's critical. Now, how are we going to make sure that everything works the way we'd like it to? I'm going to give it every piece of my energy to assure that we can have a system that works for all of our citizens.
And now we go to Ms. O'Brien for 1 minute.
Thank you. I believe that we need to respect the referendum process, but I also understand that one of the referendum questions right now, frankly, would wreak a havoc with our ability to pay for schools, with our ability to pay for those roads and bridges that we've just been talking about. I want to return the income tax to 5% just as the voters intended it, but I also understand practically, and unfortunately Mr. Romney doesn't understand the economy and the budget deficit that we're facing right now. For us to fully implement that referendum question right now, we will cut local aid to our schools. There will not be enough money to pay the debt service on that environmental bond issue or the bond issue or the housing bond issue. We will not be able to pay for roads and bridges. We will not be able to create more of a supply of affordable housing. That's one of the reasons why I want to fully implement that tax cut referendum that was passed by the voters, but I also have to apply my common sense and what is in the best interest of the children and seniors and families in this state.
A question now from Michael DeFilippi. He's a student in the School of Arts and Sciences, and his question goes to Ms. O'Brien.
Ms. O'Brien, would you support a policy allowing local school districts to give high school diplomas to students that fulfilled all the requirements that that district requires in terms of coursework and attendance, but have not passed the MCAS exam?
I've stated earlier in this campaign that I believe that the approach that the administration is taking right now to allow local certificates for students who've passed all the courses, who've done all the other requirements, that they can get a certificate of satisfactory completion. But my job is to make sure that we continue to push education reform. I'm very concerned that over the course of the last 10 years or so, we haven't been able to do everything that we need to take the frameworks and the curriculum and the test and make sure that they're fully aligned. Making sure that every single child has the opportunity to do well on that test. When I'm governor, we're going to work towards smaller class sizes. We're going to work to get better teacher training so that those teachers have the skills that they need to do that important job. We will make sure, and also I will oppose Mitt Romney's budget plan, which will cut funding so that we lose the opportunity to continue with education reform.
Mr. Romney, a minute.
I likewise agree that we should have a certificate of completion program, but I stand by the MCAS test for a graduation certificate. I must admit to being confused by the Beacon Hill speak about do you support the ballot initiative that said to roll back the tax rate to 5%. I'm not cutting funding to schools. I'm not cutting funding to the seniors and to the elderly, and to continue to say that is just not accurate. I said that by the end of my first term, I'll get that tax rate back to what the voters approved. I didn't say now. I said by the end of my first term, and by the end of my first term, we're going to have a stronger economy because I'm going to be governor, and I'm going to be knocking on doors, bringing jobs to Massachusetts. We're going to have an economy that can help pay for the taxes or provide the taxes to give the needed services in our Commonwealth. I'm not going to cut services, Shannon. I'm going to make sure we cut bureaucracy and make the state work for our people again.
And we are out of time for questions. We want to thank two more students who didn't get to ask their questions, both from the School of Engineering, Heather Sirabassi and Alan King, and we apologize to both of you, and we're sorry we couldn't get to that. We need to move on right now to the closing statements. We do have time enough to allow the full 2 minutes in length. The first closing statement, 2 minutes, to Mr. Romney.
Thank you very much. It's been a privilege to be here, and appreciate the questioners and your participation. Appreciate also the young people who are here at the college. This is a critical election for you. This may determine whether or not there's a job waiting at the end of your graduation, and employment is one of the key issues that the entire Commonwealth faces. I want you to recognize that you have a clear choice before you, whether you're going to have somebody who will continue the status quo in Beacon Hill, or whether you want somebody from the outside who will bring new ideas and new vision. You can tell the difference between us. I don't favor raising taxes every time there are problems. I did not favor cutting 50,000 people off our health care rolls. I will not do that sort of thing. That's just wrong. I do not favor patronage. I'll fight it. I don't favor increasing my salary. I will not increase my salary ever if I'm elected governor. And I will never participate in the Beacon Hill salute. I will always stand up and take responsibility for the problems as well as for the good times. This is a critical election in part because of the need for a stronger economy. You know, every state has a Department of Economic Development. You can see them if you go to a corporation. They're sitting in the front lobby waiting in to go call on middle managers and ask those managers to come look at their state. Well, I'm somebody who speaks the language of business. I know many chief executive officers, and there's probably almost not one in the country that wouldn't let me in the front door to go sit down with a CEO and say to them, come look at Springfield, come look at the Merrimack Valley, come look at the South Coast, come look at downtown Boston. I can sell Massachusetts. It's what I do. I know how to do that. I'm going to work tirelessly as governor to bring more good jobs to Massachusetts. Now let me tell you something. I'm not in this race because of rich people. Rich people can take care of themselves. I'm not in this race for big corporations. Big corporations can take care of themselves. I'm in this race for people who don't have lobbyists on Beacon Hill. I want to be your voice. I need your vote. I hope you'll support me so I can help make Massachusetts a state of opportunity for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romney. 2 minutes to Ms. O'Brien.
Thank you, and I'm so glad that we've had an opportunity to come here to the college to talk about our very different values and different viewpoints about how the next governor should lead this state out of the problems that we're facing right now. I'm very proud of my record of success in 4 years as the state treasurer. I've saved $500 million. I've returned a record amount of local aid to cities and towns. But it's sometimes even more important for me to focus on the people behind the numbers that I deal with so often as treasurer. I've run a series of money conferences. We held one out here in Springfield. 700 people attended. I got a letter from one of the women who attended one of our money conferences, a woman named Michelle. She wrote a letter that said that before she attended the money conference, the finances of her and her family, they were a mess. They didn't have a retirement plan. They didn't have a plan to save for their daughter to go to college. And the creditors were calling them morning, noon, and night. And then she came to the conference, and she took the book home that we gave to her. They put in place a They've cut up those credit cards. The creditors aren't calling. But she closed the letter by saying, and now my husband and I, we don't fight anymore. I'm running for governor because there are lots of Michelles all across the state who need help getting more affordable housing, who need help getting health care that they can afford, who need help getting the skills that they need to get a good job. I'm running for governor because I've already demonstrated that I know how to fix things on Beacon Hill. I know how to set an agenda. I know how to get things done. I will work hard every day for all of those Michelles all across the state. I will work hard every day to continue that record of serving the best interest of the people of Massachusetts, to make Massachusetts a better place to live and to work and to raise a family.
And I want to thank the audience for being so well behaved. First of all, quickly, I want to thank President Anthony Caprio, the students, the staff, the faculty of Western New England College for putting up with the inconvenience and the parking problems, the traffic the last few days. Thank you all very much. Thanks to our panelists, the organizations they represent. Thank you to our candidates. In alphabetical order again, Shannon O'Brien and Mitt Romney. Finally, thank you for watching. Good night.
All right. This campaign season, see more than 100 candidate debates.